Okay, for our field sketching excursion today, I'm going to use my trusty three-legged camp stool. I have a piece of wood that I place on my knees for painting. It allows me to lay my stuff out. We're going to use this great new ZigZag sketchbook from Blick, which is an accordion book which opens up nicely. It has really nice heavy watercolor paper, and you can use it horizontally or vertically, so it's a really handy sketchbook to use in the field. I'm going to pencil with this Pentel Twist-Erase, which I use a 2B because I can draw really nice and lightly. And then the next step is I'll ink with this Winsor Newton waterproof ink pen, which I really like. And then we'll finish up with coloring with these Winsor Newton brush markers, which have a really nice flexible point, and you can get some really nice color mixtures with it, bright, colorful drawings. And with that, we'll get started. So what we're going to draw today, the panorama, is going to start over here, slowly move around and draw this panorama of this beautiful oak grove. Okay, so I'm going to start off with pencil, but I think the very first thing to do when you're drawing in the field is where are you in your relationship to the north. So I like to always carry a compass and lay it down on my drawing so I can see where north is. And one of the things I like to do right away before I start my drawing is just indicate the direction that I'm in. And I'll start with putting north, the direction of north is, so I'm drawing in the north. The next thing I'm going to do is kind of indicate the weather. It's really good. So today is sort of a sunny day. So I kind of think it's really important to annotate your drawings. So we're lucky to have some nice sun. So I'll start my drawing very lightly in pencil, like very, very light pencil. And what I like about the pencil, the 2B pencil that I use, is after I begin to lay it out and I get things in place, this allows me on this paper, especially on the ZigZag, it allows me to kind of come back in and I can darken things up to begin the next step, which will be inking. After I lay it out in pencil and I'm happy with the composition, then I can really go in and get right into the inking. So when I have my drawing laid out in pencil, the next step is inking. And like with the pencil, I like to start with sort of light ink, and I'll start with the outlines. And once I begin to feel like I have it, like I'll use the ink pen kind of just gently draw. And then I like to use crosshatching to build up volume. I'll crosshatch it to give in the shade. And for the bark, I'm going to be very, very light. And then I'll come back here for this arcing branch. I'm going to arc that around. And one of the things I like to do to kind of create this interesting concept of perspective is where one branch crosses over the other, I like to give it a little bit of a shade pattern. And then especially where the tree trunks go into the tree canopy, this is really helpful to also kind of give it a little bit of a shadow, and it actually makes it look like it's disappearing into the canopy of trees. And then for the ground plane, I like to use sort of like parallel lines, and then I'll just kind of create these sort of arches to kind of create the contour of the line, and then add a little bit of grass, a little kind of like wiggly lines to show the grass. And then ground usually has rocks, and I'll use stippling and sort of dots and kind of that crosshatch to get the ground plane line. And then once I really know what I want and I'm happy with it, I'll come back in and I'll go over those lines several times to kind of like really make the foreground lines stay out and kind of really create sort of the emphasis. And that's the basics of inking. Okay, so now we're going to use the Winsor Newton brush pens. And what I've done is to kind of familiarize myself with the colors, I've created a little sort of cheat sheet color palette that I use to select my colors. And basically what I do is I start with the very, very light colors first. I want to start with the background, and because this is sort of a sacred forest, I really want it kind of like to have this ethereal glow. So in the background, I'm going to give it a very, very, very light kind of brushing stroke. And from the background, I'm going to let that kind of like feather up so it's kind of dark. And the nice thing about these brush markers is I can come back and I want the ground plane to be a little darker as it feathers up. So you can see that's setting up. You can begin to see how the color is defining the branching structure. To get a little variation in that earlier tone, I'm going to come back in with sort of a rose color and kind of darken up the vegetation, and also kind of darken the edge of the foreground trees. And then the next step is to come in with a little bit darker of a brown, and you can see I'm going to use this to draw, and where the shadow areas is, see I'm drawing now, I'm kind of drawing the bark as it goes up, and that's what kind of gives the tree its volume. I'll keep doing that along the edge to give it its volume. And then there are other trees, like where this comes in front of it, I'll give that a little bit of a color as it comes behind. And then as I keep going, I'll come back in with even a darker brown, and you can see now I can really, because the nice thing about these brush pens, it has a really nice point. So you see I can really kind of begin to draw the tree and also kind of like begin to put in the shadows and pull that around. And that you can see that really begins to give it a nice sense of volume, and you can see there's getting to be a nice sense of depth. And then I'll come back in with my kind of gray tone again. I kind of like add a little bit of darkness to those and kind of darken this in, and you can see I'm kind of working back and forth. Okay, so for the canopy, I'm going to lightly put in a little bit of green, not a lot, because it's very bright. And to kind of tone it down, I'll come back in with a little bit of brown, and that gives it kind of the oak leaf kind of color as I draw it in, and kind of like get it that color. I'll also use this color like in the ground plane to get some nice ground plane, and then at this point I'll continue to color the trees. Now the last thing to think about too is the ground plane here. One of the things I did is I have this sort of fairy ring, because you can see we're in quite of a magical place. So for this fairy ring, I'm going to put a little bit of yellow, because I really want it to kind of like be expressive of that color. And then I'm going to use my purple to kind of give it a kind of a glow, you know, like sort of a magical glow. And then I'll come back in with some brown to kind of show the base of that and kind of darken up. And that's pretty much how I'll keep laying the drawing out. Okay, now for the reveal of our afternoon's work. We're going to reveal the beauty of the idea of this panoramic sketchbook, and you can see the wonderful use of this to be able to draw this panorama of this enchanted forest that we've been looking at for this afternoon. And it really can kind of see the detail and the glow of this ancient woods. And if you look closely, you can see the fairy ring in the foreground. Unfortunately, we didn't see any of the magical creatures dancing around, but if you look closely in the background, they'll appear. Okay, the nice thing about coming back into the studio and having a chance to reflect on what you've done, it gives you a little bit of an opportunity to kind of refine things. And for this example, you know, like I might come back in here and darken out the lines to kind of use heavier lines to make sure that the foreground trees are in front of one another. It gives me a chance to kind of like darken up lines and kind of accentuate things. And it's also nice to be sitting down and be able to kind of look at what you've done and make the minor refinements. Because the other thing too, I found the more I work on a drawing, the more kind of opportunity I have to screw it up. So it's almost like you got to be careful. It's kind of like eating. You want to stop eating before you're full. So it's a really fine line, but I think what's important at this stage is to be able to make sure, like your lines have definition and you can kind of get a sense of depth. What I'm going to do now from the objects that I collected on site back in the studio, I'm going to draw these kind of ephemeral pieces that we found on the site. And I didn't come up with this idea. A great plein air painter by the name of Tony Foster will always collect these things when he's out plein air painting, and then he'll add them to the bottom of the painting when he comes back to kind of give it a context. So the first thing that we found was the acorn. So I'm going to start with the acorn. And then this is an oak leaf from the site that's really, really nice. It's nice and petite. So I'll begin to draw that, and I'm just going to draw directly, even without, my penciling this in. And you can look back, and I think this really, to me, I'm really happy with this. It really captures this sort of magical kind of element of this little enchanted forest. And you can see even too, I kind of like the trees. After I started to draw for a while, the trees start to become alive and have a personality and facial expressions. And you don't want to be out there too long before you become enchanted yourself.